Welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is David Beck. David is a certified financial planner, and he has his own company, Bay Area Planners. His practice focuses on helping families plan how to pay for their children's college education. David's interest in college financial planning began in November 2006. He was trying to help a niece who was planning her college education, and he decided to focus on that area, and it developed into his full-time business. He's recently releasing an online course in college planning. Did that happen, David? You've got your online course out there. And anyway, so that has over 100 video instruction manuals, or modules, excuse me. Wow. Today, David and I are going to talk about the challenges facing college-bound families and what they can do to prepare. Now, as we get started, I want to caution our viewers, as I often do, that this is just an introduction to this area. Help is available for further guidance. That's part of what David's here for. Okay, David, thank you. Welcome to the show. Good to have you back again.
Thank you.
So, David, what's been going on in the world of higher education since we talked about this topic about a year or so ago?
I think the big change is that there's a shift from increasing enrollment to completion. That's maybe not something you've read in the newspaper about, but it's definitely happening in the industry, in the higher education industry, as I call it.
In other words, they're trying to get people to graduate.
They're trying to get people to graduate, right. And that is affecting the economics of higher education, specifically in the public colleges. So public colleges, if they needed more money, tried to enroll more students or would grow in that way, because they knew the students would be supported by the federal government through financial aid. But that is now shifting towards the emphasis being on completion. And what that means for colleges, especially these public colleges, is that when the states are reducing their support for colleges and they can't add students to get more money, then they have to get more money per student. In other words, they have to put the prices up. So we've obviously seen that in the newspapers. One way to put prices up without affecting the in-state population is to get more out-of-state students. So I think we've been reading about that in the paper as well.
Yeah.
In-state or out-of-state, and also international students.
Right.
So what we're seeing, because of this decline in state support, is almost a privatization of the public colleges.
That's a disturbing trend.
It's disturbing a lot of people.
Yes. Before we go on, folks, I want to let you know today is November 27th, 2012, and you're going to be seeing this interview sometime later. So there are going to be developments that are going to happen. It's inevitable. Time marches on. But anyway, just bear that in mind as you watch our interview here. Okay, well, this new trend, what does it mean in practical terms for families that are looking to send a child to college next year?
Well, what it means is that the public colleges are beginning to have to encroach, as it were, on the space of private colleges. So they're looking for better quality students, the ones who are actually going to complete. And also their costs are going up, their prices.
The tuition fees,
tuition
whatever.
fees are going up. So that puts them more in direct competition with the third tier or even the second tier private colleges. So what might that mean? It might mean some problems for some weaker private colleges, the colleges with bad balance sheets that are now having to compete with these publics. But it also means that we've got this continuing trend towards higher tuition, higher expense for families sending children to college. There was a slowdown for the private colleges and in their income, their revenue,
increases, yeah,
because of the Great Recession. But frankly, they're now back to having net revenue increases each year. Colleges, like any organization, want to grow and become better. How do they do this? Well, to grow, obviously, they grow by having more students. They become better by building new buildings and getting better quality faculty. That all takes money. So colleges naturally want to increase their revenue each year. And like I say, if they can't do it by increasing the number of students, then they have to increase the tuition cost per student.
Well, they can also get endowments from Bill Gates and Mr. Buffett and so forth, and they are.
Certainly the top colleges have endowments.
Well, like Stanford, I mean, they talk
Yes.
about their endowment. I mean, geez.
Huge endowments. Those endowments did well up until the Great Recession. They were hit during the Great Recession. They're beginning to come back, but at not the same rate as before. So for some colleges, yes, they're a good source of money, good source of money to provide financial aid. But there's a lot of colleges that really don't have good size endowments.
Yeah. And there are other things that colleges do, of course, to raise money. I'm thinking of like Stanford again, or Berkeley, or Harvard. These colleges, they're unusual. They're not the run of the mill. So, as far as what we're talking about, but obviously they can go out and they get these grants for doing research and so forth. And a lot of it is actually funded by federal government, defense contracts and so forth.
That's correct. And as you mentioned earlier, we're at a point here we don't really know how the politics are going to play out with regard to the fiscal cliff, the deficit, and how that will affect higher education. And a couple of ways that it can do that is in the money for financial aid, but as you just pointed out, also the money that's available to universities for grants for research.
Right. Okay, well, we got to move on because we were talking really about families' problems here. All right. So what is the federal government doing to improve the affordability of higher education? That's a big question right now, isn't it?
The Obama administration has probably put more effort into higher education issues than some previous administrations. In particular, I would identify that it's pushed something called the net price calculator. So what this is, when you think about the cost for a family of sending a student to college, what does it depend on? It depends on the tuition, obviously, of the college itself, or the cost of attendance. That would be the tuition, the room and board and that. But they obviously get some help. They get some help in terms of need-based financial aid, and they might get some help from the college in terms of scholarships or grants. But the difficulty families face is pinning these numbers down, especially that last one, the merit-based aid. So the net price calculator, the government's idea there was that the college should give the prospective student an idea of how much it's going to cost them, the net price, before they actually apply there. So it's a calculator. The student goes onto the college's website, enters the information. It gives the student not only the need-based aid, but it will also tell the student if that student can expect some merit-based aid, scholarships or grant money. So that's a big step forward. But as any significant step like that, it's going to take a few years to play out and for the colleges to get used to this idea and students to get used to this idea that the information's available.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's always seemed dicey about what sort of merit-based aid that you might get, or scholarships and that sort of thing.
Right. So colleges weren't used to doing this, weren't used to sort of divulging this information. And again, it's one of those competitive game changers, because not only can a student see what they could expect from a college, other colleges can see how their competitors are treating this merit aid issue. Some colleges have found that they are not doing well in this kind of competitive aspect, and are actually hiding the net price calculator. By government regulation, they have to have it, but they don't necessarily make it easy to find on their website.
That's interesting. And I guess, yeah, everything is revolving. I'm thinking back when I was looking at colleges, there was no such thing as websites. And, I was just going and getting a bunch of books and trying to put the pieces together. Oh, okay, well, maybe you can talk a little bit. Well, excuse me, let me go ahead with this question, I guess.
Yeah.
And then if you want to add something, that's fine. But maybe you could explain some of the challenges that families are facing now when considering college.
Considering college is, it's very complex. So I like to think of it as three overlapping circles, like in a Venn diagram. You have the goals for the higher education of the student. Then you have expectations. What kind of college are they going to? And then you also have this affordability aspect. So you can see with these three things in play, it can get quite kind of complicated. You could have colleges that meet the goals but not the affordability, or that are affordable and meet the goals but the student doesn't want to go there. So it's families have to try and put together an understanding of all of those issues and then find the colleges that meet all three requirements.
So, I really view this sort of as a negotiation that's happening. One with the universities, another with the students, another with the parents. And they're all trying to sort of, sort this thing out. And, unfortunately, the students' goals may not jive with their parents' goals for the student and so forth.
Especially when it comes to the financing, the money.
Yeah.
And all this sort of thing is much better done when it's done in advance, when you plan ahead. What happens every year about April, which is the time that students get offers from the colleges. I get panicked calls from parents who say that their students have got 4 or 5 colleges to choose from, but they can't afford any one of them. That's a bit late in the game to be finding that out.
It's tough. I just want to interject something here, and sort of because it's something that I've sort of wrestled with for some time. But I think that I think back to when I was going to university again, back in ancient times, and so there are different attitudes about education. What is the function of a college education? And especially when you go through a time like we've just been going through, a big recession and so forth, and everybody saying, I want to make my dollars work for me. I want to see, if you will, a return on my investment. And so, sort of like, what is the function of a college education? To me, largely, it's, to help people to think clearly, about problems and so forth. But many people view it as a trade school. In other words, I want to see the payback. Okay, folks, my parents sort of lucked out. I got into accounting. It's a trade school, but I tried to take some enrichment along the way about these other things. But meanwhile, there's an awful lot of people that have other interests, and they're they're trying to grow and discover themselves in this process. Maybe you could comment a little bit about that. I don't know. What do you think?
Actually, that's right. The American university system or higher education is different in exactly that respect, in that it allows students to take foundation courses for the first couple of years and to discover themselves, so that hopefully for the senior years, the junior and senior years, they know what major they want to go into. Very different from Europe, where I got my education. We went in there streamed into the major, and it was very difficult to change. So if at the age of 18 you'd made a mistake, that wasn't too good. So yeah, there's always a debate between, is it a private good or a public good? The private good being that you come out of it with employable.
Yes.
Whereas the liberal arts colleges keep pointing out that no, what we're trying to do is to promote, good thinkers, good thinkers that will be useful in a number of situations, not just, as you say, the particular trade that they received at university.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move on. So, what's your approach on how families should tackle college planning?
Well, where families mess up, as I say, is that they don't have an understanding of the process. So my main goal is to give them that understanding. So it's an educational thing. Certainly I work with families on their individual numbers, but the numbers change over the course of the year. If they change their selection of colleges, then that changes the numbers. So to my mind, it's better to educate them as to how to view the process and understand the process and do it themselves than it is for them to always have to be coming back to me. So the way I approach it is that there are 7 steps to get into college. The first 3 are strategic, and they are basically getting an understanding of the system, understanding their financial aid, and selecting the colleges. So that's the strategic part of it. That's those 3 overlapping circles that I talked about. So if they do a good job there, then they come out with a good college list that's going to be affordable and that the student's going to get in and that the student likes. After that, it becomes tactical. So this time of year, we're talking late in the calendar year. Any student going to college next year should already have that list. So what we're talking about going forward are the tactical aspects of it. Those last 4 aspects, 4 steps to college are actually the financial aid applications themselves, evaluating the offers and making a choice, figuring out cash flow, and then understanding if you need to take loans. And they're all kind of tactical things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What are you advising families now about paying for college?
Paying for college, there's only 3 sources of money, really. There's your savings, your income, and borrowing from the future. When I see families, if they've saved, that's good, but if they haven't, it's a little bit late for doing that. So I work with them on income, and income would include getting financial assistance from the college. And if that doesn't work, then we have to look at loans.
Mm-hmm. Which I really, really don't like.
Well, as a financial planner, yes, I would, if things go well, we don't have to do loans.
Yeah.
But college is so expensive these days that loans are, definitely a fact of life. We've all heard
feels
about
like it's
student
inevitable.
debt.
Yeah, we were lucky. So, one, and again, when my kids went to school was a little while ago, so it's not, current scenario. I know it's becoming more and more difficult.
It is.
But let's just say all of them worked, and we helped. I think all of them got some financial aid, thank God. And anyway, and none of them owed anything when they finished.
That today would be a really excellent result.
Yeah.
College, or higher education is an investment, and it's generally thought of to have a good return on that investment. So some people use a number like 10%. So you can get a 10% return on your investment paying for higher education. If you don't graduate with too much in the way of debt, it's manageable. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. But we've obviously seen in the papers and on TV examples where students, do the wrong things. They go into a higher education course too expensive at college. They shift majors. They transfer. They take too long. They spend too long in there, spending a 5th or even a 6th year. They're financing all of this with debt. They come out with a huge debt, and then guess what? They were studying a course that isn't well studying a major that isn't very marketable. So that's the recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've seen some very unhappy cases in some of these young people that are shouldering staggering debt. I mean, talking hundreds of thousands of dollars or over $100,000.
Mm.
And, you know, and they can't get out from under it because it's not dischargeable on bankruptcy.
Right, and it affects so many aspects of their lives when they come out of college. So the ability to marry, the ability to buy a house, the ability to take the kind of job you want, to live where you want. It impacts all of those things. Mm-hmm. So the average debt for this last year, the class graduating in 2011, was $26,600. Mm-hmm. That of itself is not too bad. You know, $26,600 is manageable. The rule of thumb is that you shouldn't borrow more than your first year's salary. So that's manageable. But as we know, within an average, there's a lot.
Yeah, some are much higher, some much lower.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Well, do you think that college is still worth the expense?
Well, yes. But I also recognize that there are perhaps alternatives to college. If we are talking $250,000 to send somebody through college, and we can easily be talking about that with some top schools, are there other ways to use the $250,000? What about putting a child into business if they're that way inclined? Mm-hmm. Buy them a franchise. Mm-hmm. That might work. And then we have to also admit that push that we talked about earlier at the beginning of the program about increasing enrollment, the idea that more and more students should go to college. Does that really make sense? Are there some students at college who really shouldn't be there, who might do better off at a trade school? We should consider that as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things to think about, I mean, related to this. Well, one is, of course, is just a concern about the direction of our country. So I hate to get too political, but anyway, I mean, it seems like an awful lot of the talent that's happening in American industry, frankly, is coming from overseas. That's what I've been seeing. A lot from China, a lot from India, and so forth. So these people are very well educated. It's astounding that in China, it's a national directive. You will learn English in school, and they come here and they're functional. And can any of us say that about when we go over there? Very well educated as far as being able to contribute to companies, working for tech companies and so forth. And so, but what does it mean for, what are the people that are here, our children, are they going to end up being the working class for these people? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out as a concern, as an American citizen.
At its upper levels, American higher education is the best in the world. But that doesn't necessarily is the same at lower levels, or in the high school arena or the elementary arena. So really, we have to consider the education of a human being, the whole breadth of it, not just that college piece.
Right.
So the issues and the problems go beyond just higher education.
Right. And I guess I'll throw out the other piece, and that is, folks, even though you don't have a college education, it doesn't mean every door is closed to you. A college education does open doors to you, but there are a lot of very successful people. I think maybe even Bill Gates is not a college graduate, and so forth. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So anyway, so those possibilities are there. If you're a person of talent. And so forth, that sometimes you find a different door, a different direction to accomplish something.
And education is available on the internet. We've heard perhaps of the Khan Academy, or these massive open online courses.
Yes.
That are given by top professors. Actually, I'm from England, and there was something there called the Open University that started in 1971. People used to stay up late at night or early in the morning on their TV watching university courses.
Right, and you can, actually, they've had them on public television here. I believe Create TV here even broadcasts some of these in our community. Plus the webinars and the other things that are now being made available. So I'm hoping, yes, that this is going to create alternatives for people, and eventually, because I think some of these you have difficulty getting credit for now unless you do an enrollment or something.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Yeah.
But I think we're looking at a bubble. Colleges can't keep on getting more and more expensive. So these online courses will find a way to work themselves into the system, either sort of within the college experience, the residential college experience, or by creating credentials, certificates, certification.
David, maybe you'd like to throw out a final thought.
The final thought is that you should start planning early. Wherever I see things that have gone wrong, it's because people didn't work to understand the process of applying to college early enough.
Okay. I want to thank you so much for coming and being my guest. It's been a pleasure having you here. Maybe when we figure out what we're going to do with our tax system, we'll have another meeting and talk a little bit about tax planning for college education. But I just didn't think this was the right time when we're trying to decide, what our tax system is going to be to some degree, or whether we're going to kick the ball down the road.
All right, we'll find out soon enough.
Okay, folks, we'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.